Commander Hyjin gripped the metal railing of the bridge as another explosion lit up the darkness of space. The astral dawn shook violently, throwing several crew members to the floor. Through the massive viewport, she watched in horror as the Crystal Wing, one of their newest ships, broke apart like a fragile toy. "Shields at 20%, shouted Engineer Saman from her station, her blue fingers dancing across holographic controls. "We can't take another hit like that." The Korthak destroyers moved through space like hungry sharks, their black holes reflecting no light. Each ship was twice the size of the largest Solani vessel, covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly crimson energy. When they fired, space itself seemed to burn. Lieutenant Jinei's voice cracked as she read the casualty reports. "Admiral Sung-ho, we've lost the Crystal Wing and Peaceful Current. The Harmony's Dream is venting atmosphere. Captain Lejeune reports his engines are offline." Admiral Sung-ho stood perfectly still in the center of the bridge. His pale blue skin almost translucent under the emergency lighting. His large, dark eyes, so common among his people, reflected the burning wreckage outside. At 200 years old, he was considered young for a Zalani admiral. His people lived long, peaceful lives, sometimes reaching 500 years, but none of them had ever seen war like this. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. 14 vessels. "Still combat capable, sir," Guinea replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Out of 47 that we started with." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of damaged hull plating. Captain Dongwook, the ship's communications officer, looked up from his console with tears in his large eyes. "Yes, sir." The Morning Star just went dark. No response to our signals. Hyjin closed her eyes for a moment, remembering Captain Yujin, who commanded that ship. They had graduated from the Naval Academy together, back when the biggest threat they faced was asteroid collisions during mining operations. The Zalani had been peaceful for over 3 centuries. Their ships were built for exploration, research, and trade, not war. Admiral Soman called out, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Korthak fleet. They're preparing for another assault wave." Through the viewport, the enemy ships began moving into attack formation. The Korthak vessels looked like weapons given form, angular, brutal, covered in armor plating and gun turrets. Everything about them screamed violence and conquest. Sung-ho had read the intelligence reports about the Korthak Empire. They were a race of warriors who lived only for battle and expansion. Their soldiers were genetically modified for combat, standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered 12 star systems in the past year, enslaving peaceful species or wiping them out completely. "How long until they reach our homeworld?" Sung-ho asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dongwook checked his calculations twice before responding. "At their current speed, 18 hours, sir? Maybe 16 if they don't stop to finish off our remaining ships." The thought of Korthak soldiers walking through the crystal cities of Zalani Prime made Hyjin sick to her stomach. She pictured the beautiful gardens where children played, the libraries full of ancient knowledge, the art galleries that held thousands of years of culture. All of it would burn. "Sir," Janae suddenly called out. "Incoming transmission from the High Council." The holographic projector in the center of the bridge flickered to life, showing the ancient face of Elder Minsu. Even in the blue-tinted hologram, his fear was obvious. Behind him, Hyjin could see smoke and the glow of fires. "Admiral Sung-ho, the capital is under bombardment from orbit," Minzu said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "You must retreat to the outer system immediately. We're broadcasting an emergency distress signal across all known frequencies." "Elder, with all respect, who would answer such a call?" Sung-ho asked bitterly. "The Corvan Republic has already refused our plea for help. The Vexian Confederacy won't risk war with the Korthak Empire. The Stellar Alliance claims they're too far away to assist. We're completely alone." Minsu's image flickered as another explosion shook the government building where he was broadcasting from. "Perhaps not completely alone, Admiral. Our quantum communicators have reached into distant sectors of the galaxy regions we've never explored. We're offering everything we have. Our gravitational manipulation technology, our medical advances, our complete star charts, our energy research. Everything to anyone willing to help us survive. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The Zilani were offering their most precious secrets, technologies that had taken centuries to develop, two complete strangers in exchange for military protection they couldn't provide for themselves. Suddenly, Dongwook's communication console began flashing with incoming signals. His four-fingered hands moved quickly over the controls as message after message appeared on his screen. "Sir, we're receiving responses from multiple species across the galaxy," he reported, his voice rising with hope. "The Andromedan Collective says they're declining to assist. Rigel Federation also refuses. The Centauri Alliance, his voice fell. ... They also decline." One by one, the responses came in. Each one was the same polite refusals, expressions of sympathy, but no offers of military aid. The galaxy, it seemed, was too afraid of the Korthok Empire to risk helping the Zilani. "Wait," Dongwook said suddenly, his eyes widening. "There's one more transmission coming in. The signal is weak, very distant. It's from a system called Sol." The bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. None of them had ever heard of Sol or any species that lived there. "What are they saying?" Jean asked, moving closer to Dongwook's station. The communications officer worked to clean up the signal, adjusting frequencies and boosting the receiver power. "The message is, it's very short, sir. It says help is coming. Hold your positions. Signed Admiral Kunshu of the United Earth Fleet." "Earth," Jin whispered, the strange word feeling foreign in her mouth. "What kind of species calls?" "Their planet Earth?" Elder Minsu's hologram leaned forward with interest. "Earth. I've never heard of such a world in any of our databases. But if they're willing to help..." Sir Soman interrupted. "Long-range sensors are detecting hyperspace signatures. Multiple ships jumping toward our system." Unknown to the Zilani, their desperate message had reached far beyond the civilized sectors of the galaxy. In the monitoring stations of ancient empires, alien analysts were reading the same intercepted communications with growing alarm. Encrypted messages flew between distant worlds, all carrying the same terrifying news. The Deathworlders are mobilizing. But the Zilani had never heard the term Deathworlder. They had no idea that their saviors came from a world so dangerous that most galactic species considered it uninhabitable. They didn't know that Earth was classified as a Class 12. Deathworld, a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife tried to kill its inhabitants every single day. All they knew was that somewhere in the darkness of space, someone had heard their cry for help. And for the first time in days, Admiral Sung-Ho allowed himself to hope that his people might survive to see another dawn. 3 days before the desperate Zilani message reached Earth's military command, Lieutenant Jae-won was having what he thought would be another boring night shift at Outpost Vigilance. The small monitoring station floated silently in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, its sensors constantly scanning deep space for any signs of alien activity. Jae-won sipped his coffee and watched the endless stream of data scroll across multiple screens. For the past 6 months, he had been part of humanity's first deep space listening project. Most nights, all he heard was cosmic background radiation and the occasional signal from Earth's outer colonies. But tonight was different. At exactly 23:47 ship time, every alarm in the station began screaming at once. "What the hell?" Jae-won jumped from his chair, spilling hot coffee across his uniform. The main communication array was going crazy, picking up a signal unlike anything in their databases. The transmission was clearly artificial, structured, complex, and definitely not from anywhere in the Sol system. His hands shook as he activated the emergency protocol. Within minutes, the signal was being transmitted directly to Earth Defense Command, where it would wake up some very important people in the middle of the night. The translation took 18 hours. When the computers finally decoded the alien language, the message was simple and terrifying. "Help us. We are dying." Captain Borum had been sleeping peacefully in her quarters aboard the UES Indomitable when the priority alert came through. As the flagship's executive officer, she was used to emergency calls, but this one was different. The communication came directly from Admiral Chen, the head of Earth Defense Command himself. "Captain, get to the war room immediately. We have first contact." Those 4 words changed everything. Bjorn threw on her uniform and ran through the corridors of the massive ship. The Indomitable was humanity's pride, a kilometer-long dreadnought that could house 5,000 crew members and enough firepower to level a small moon. It had been built in the orbital shipyards above Earth. It's designed specifically for deep space operations that might encounter hostile alien forces. The war room was already buzzing with activity when Borum arrived. Admiral Kung Su stood at the center of a holographic display that showed star charts, alien ship designs, and tactical data. At 52, he was one of Earth's youngest admirals, but also one of its most experienced combat veterans. He had fought in the colony wars on Mars, led the successful defense of Europa against rebel forces, and designed the military doctrine that transformed humanity from a single-planet species into a formidable spacefaring civilization. "Admiral, the alien transmission has been confirmed authentic," Bjorn reported, handing him a data tablet with the complete translation. "Our linguists worked with the AI systems all night. The species calls themselves the Zilani. Intelligence estimates they have approximately 2.3 billion inhabitants, spread across 4 planets in a system about 80 light-years from here." Kung Su studied the holographic display showing the distant Zilani system. The tactical projection revealed a civilization under siege, their planets surrounded by an enormous enemy fleet that dwarfed anything humanity had ever assembled. "What do we know about their attackers?" he asked, zooming in on the enemy ship formations. Commander Hyenwu, the fleet's chief intelligence officer, stepped forward with additional data streaming across his tablet. "Attackers call themselves the Korthok Empire, sir. Long range. Scans suggest they're a highly militaristic civilization with superior numbers, but technology that appears comparable to our own. Their ships are larger than ours, but they seem to rely more on brute force than advanced engineering." "How many ships are we talking about?" asked Captain Tae-young, who had just arrived from his own vessel, the heavy cruiser Soul's Fury. The battle-scarred veteran had served under Kun Su for over a decade, and his ship was famous throughout the fleet for surviving impossible odds. Conservative estimates put the Korthok fleet at over 200 vessels, Hyenwu replied. "But here's what's really interesting. We've been intercepting communications from other alien species across the galaxy. Dozens of civilizations received the same distress call from the Zilani, but they're all refusing to help." The room fell quiet except for the constant hum of the ship's systems. Bjorn could see the confusion on everyone's faces. "Why would they refuse?" she asked. "If the Zilani are peaceful and the Korthok are conquerors, wouldn't other species want to stop them?" Hyenwu's expression grew serious. "Because of what they call us, Captain. We've been monitoring alien communication networks for months now, ever since we developed hyperspace communication technology. In their classification systems, Earth is designated as a Class 12 Deathworld." Deathworld. Tae-young repeated the unfamiliar term. "Most galactic species evolved on what they call garden worlds," Yoon explained, pulling up comparative data on the main display. "Planets with stable climates, low radiation levels, gentle gravity, and minimal natural disasters. They view Earth as, well, as a hellscape that somehow managed to produce intelligent life." The holographic display showed Earth alongside several alien homeworlds. The difference was startling. Where alien planets showed peaceful blue skies and gentle landscapes, Earth's image revealed hurricane systems, volcanic eruptions, massive ice sheets, and radiation belts that would kill most alien species within hours. "They can't understand how we survived," Hyenwu continued. "To them, our planet is a nightmare world, where everything from the weather to the wildlife tries to kill its inhabitants every single day. They think we must be incredibly dangerous just to have evolved there." Admiral Kunsu walked to the main viewport, looking out at the blue marble of Earth spinning slowly in the distance. "Are they wrong?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Everyone in the room knew the answer. Humanity had indeed evolved on a world that constantly tried to destroy them, It survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years, asteroid impacts that wiped out entire species, supervolcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, and countless other disasters. Every aspect of human technology, from their ships to their weapons to their survival instincts, had been forged in the crucible of Earth's relentless hostility. Sir Borum said quietly, "Should we be concerned about revealing our capabilities to unknown alien species? Once we engage, there's no going back. The galaxy will know humans exist, and they'll know what we're capable of." Kyung-Soo turned back to the tactical display, which now showed Earth's assembled fleet. 67 ships floated in formation. Around the indomitable destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and support vessels, each one had been built with a brutal efficiency learned from centuries of warfare on humanity's unforgiving homeworld. Their hulls were thick enough to withstand asteroid impacts, their reactors powerful enough to operate in the radiation storms around Jupiter, and their weapons systems designed to function in the absolute cold of deep space. The ships looked different from the graceful, artistic alien vessels they had seen in the intercepted communications. Human ships were angular, heavily armored, and covered in weapon ports. They looked exactly like what they were, tools of war built by a species that understood violence on a fundamental level. Captain Bahram Kyung-Soo said finally, "Signal to all ships in the fleet, prepare for immediate hyperspace jump to the Zilani system. And send a message to those aliens. Tell them the cavalry is coming." As alarms sounded throughout the human fleet and 67 warships began powering up their hyperdrives, encrypted communications raced across the galaxy. In the secure channels of ancient civilizations, the same message was repeated over and over. The humans are coming. For the first time in galactic history, the Deathworlders were leaving their home system. They were going to war. The space around Zilani Prime had been filled with the wreckage of battle for days, but nothing could have prepared the survivors. For what emerged from hyperspace at 1432 local time, the human fleet didn't arrive with the elegant grace that most species used when entering a star system. Instead, they tore through the fabric of space-time like bullets, their hyperspace exits, creating brilliant flashes of light that temporarily blinded sensor operators on both sides. Commander Haijin was the first to spot them on the Astral Dawn's sensors. Admiral Sungo, multiple hyperspace signatures detected. Unknown vessels entering the system, a tactical display lit up with new contacts, 67 ships of various sizes, all broadcasting the same identification, United Earth Fleet. But what shocked everyone wasn't the number of ships, it was how they looked. Where Zilani vessels were built with flowing curves and artistic beauty, and even Korthok ships maintained some sense of aesthetic design, the human ships looked like someone had taken pure violence and shaped it into metal. They were angular, brutal, and covered in so many weapon ports that they seemed more like flying fortresses than spaceships. "By the ancestors," whispered Admiral Sung-Ho, his four-fingered hands gripping the bridge railing. "Look at the size of their flagship." Commander Veximer, a seasoned Korthok warrior who had led boarding actions on dozens of enemy ships, watched his security feeds in growing horror. Soldiers were dying faster than he could track. The humans moved through the ship like they owned it, their weapons cutting down Korthok defenders with terrifying efficiency. "Target the humans with concentrated fire," Vexamor ordered through his ship's communication system. "Focus all energy weapons on their armor." A squad of 6 Korthok soldiers took position at the end of a corridor, their energy rifles charged and ready. When Sergeant Major Yunyong rounded the corner, they opened fire simultaneously. 6 beams of superheated plasma struck her armor directly, delivering enough energy to melt through most known materials. Yunyong kept walking. Impossible. Vexamor chittered into his communicator, watching the human soldier advance through a storm of energy weapons fire. Their armor should have failed. Our weapons are military grade. What the Korthok commander didn't understand was that human military equipment followed a completely different design philosophy. Where alien armor was built to deflect energy weapons and provide protection in controlled environments, human armor was designed to keep soldiers alive in situations where everything was trying to kill them. Yunyong's powered suit had been tested. In the radiation zones around Jupiter, where cosmic rays would cook unprotected aliens in minutes. It had functioned in the ice storms of Titan, where temperatures dropped to -180 degrees Celsius. Now the Korthok energy weapons were powerful, but they were nothing compared to what her armor dealt with every day, just from Earth's hostile environment. The Marines reached the ship's bridge in less than 10 minutes. By the time they breached the final blast doors, half the Korthok crew was already dead or fleeing in panic. Commander Veximer made a final desperate stand. Drawing a ceremonial sword that had been in his family for generations, Corporal Minho shot him with a weapon designed to punch holes in asteroid rock. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Kung Su was orchestrating a battle unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The main tactical display showed the positions of both fleets, with human ships systematically destroying Korthok vessels that had seemed invincible just hours before. Admiral reported Captain Bioram, "The boarding actions are proceeding ahead of schedule. We've captured 12 enemy vessels and destroyed 37 others. But the main Korthok fleet is trying to regroup for a final assault." Kyung-Soo studied the display, noting how the surviving Korthok ships were forming a defensive formation around their command vessel. General Morgak was no fool. He was trying to concentrate his remaining firepower and force the humans into a direct confrontation. Captain Borum ordered the 3rd Squadron to execute the Corona maneuver. Bioram hesitated for just a moment. "Sir, that's a Deathworld-specific tactic. Are you certain our ships can handle the thermal stress?" Captain Kyung-Soo replied with a slight smile. "We didn't earn the name Deathworlders by playing it safe." Corona maneuver was a tactical doctrine that had been developed during humanity's expansion into the Sol system. It involved using a star's corona, the superheated plasma atmosphere surrounding the stellar surface, to mask ship movements and launch surprise attacks from impossible angles. For most galactic species, even approaching a star's outer atmosphere was instant suicide. The temperatures were hot enough to vaporize most known materials, and the radiation levels would kill entire crews in seconds. For humans, who had spent decades learning to harvest energy from solar storms and operate equipment in the hellish environment around their own sun, it was just another tool of war. 6 human ships from the 3rd Squadron suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the system's primary star. The Korthok sensors tracked them until they disappeared into the stellar corona. Where the intense radiation and heat made detection impossible, "Where did they go?" demanded General Morgak from his command ship. "Our sensors show nothing." Officer Kekstar worked frantically at his console. "General, no known species can survive in a stellar corona. They must have been destroyed by the radiation." For 20 minutes, the Korthok fleet tried to regroup, believing they had forced the humans to sacrifice an entire squadron in a desperate maneuver. The remaining human ships continued their systematic destruction of Korthok vessels. But Morgak began to hope that he could still salvage victory from this disaster. That's when 6 ships emerged from the star's corona-like demons from hell itself. The human vessels glowed white-hot from their passage through the stellar atmosphere, their hulls radiating heat that would have melted most alien ships. But their weapons were still fully operational, their crews still alive and fighting. They opened fire at point-blank range, catching the Korthok fleet completely by surprise. "By the Empire," General Morgak whispered, watching his tactical display. As human ships materialize from inside a star, what manner of species fights from within stellar fire? The answer was becoming clear to everyone in the system. These weren't just aliens who had answered a distress call. These were predators from a world so hostile that it had forced them to adapt to conditions that would destroy any other known species. They fought like creatures that had spent their entire evolutionary history battling an environment that wanted them dead. The Korthok formation broke apart as ships desperately tried to escape the impossible assault. But the humans had one more advantage that no one had anticipated. Their damage control systems were designed to keep functioning even when their ships were falling apart. Korthok vessels that took significant damage would withdraw from combat to make repairs. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting, their crews working in conditions of smoke, fire, and radiation that would incapacitate other species. General Kekstar reported, his voice filled with panic. We're losing ships faster than our computers can track. These humans, they fight like the universe itself is trying to kill them. General Morgok stared at the tactical display, watching his once mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had underestimated. In that moment, he finally understood the truth that would change the galaxy forever. It's because it is, he said quietly. They're from a death world. They've been fighting for survival since the moment they first drew breath. The Korthok Empire, which had conquered 12 star systems through superior firepower and ruthless tactics, was facing something they had never encountered in their centuries of expansion. An enemy that was more dangerous than they were. The battle for the Zilani system raged for 18 brutal hours, turning the peaceful space around their homeworld into a graveyard of twisted metal and burning plasma. When the guns finally fell silent, the once mighty Korthok Empire fleet was either drifting as wreckage or fleeing in complete panic. General Morgok stood on the bridge of his flagship, Bloodclaw staring at the tactical display that showed the impossible truth. Of his original fleet of 212 vessels, only 37 remained functional. The rest had been destroyed or captured by a human force that was outnumbered 3-1. His chitinous armor was cracked from the impacts his ship had taken, and green blood seeped from wounds that would have killed lesser Korthok warriors. General, stammered intelligence officer Kekstar, his voice shaking with trauma. The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're offering medical assistance to our wounded. Morgok's mandibles clicked in confusion. In all his years of conquest, no enemy had ever offered to help Korthok survivors. The Empire's way was simple. Winners took everything. Losers died. But these Deathworlders seemed to follow completely different rules. Through the main viewport, he could see human rescue ships moving between the floating debris, pulling both Korthok and Zilani survivors from damaged vessels. The same humans who had fought like demons from hell were now risking their lives to save their enemies. Sir, his communications officer reported Admiral Kung Su is requesting to speak with you directly. Morgok straightened his massive frame, trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. When the human admiral appeared on his screen, the Korthok general was struck again by how small these creatures were. Kunsu barely reached his chest, yet this tiny being had commanded a fleet that destroyed the pride of the Empire. Is General Morgok of the Korthok Empire, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. We request terms of ceasefire. There was no mockery in Admiral Kung Su's response, no gloating over his victory. The human simply nodded with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the battle. General Morgok, your request is accepted. Withdraw all Korthok forces from Zilani space immediately. Any attempt to return will be considered an act of war against both the Zilani Confederation and the United Earth Fleet. Understood? Morgok replied, feeling the weight of his first defeat crushing down on him. We will not return. As the surviving Korthok ships limped toward the edge of the system and jumped to hyperspace, a new chapter in galactic history began. The empire that had seemed unstoppable had been broken by creatures from a death world, and word of their defeat would spread to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Sung Ho watched from the bridge of the Astral Dawn as the last Korthok vessel disappeared into hyperspace. Around him, his crew was celebrating their survival. But the Zilani admiral felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. His people had been saved by aliens they had never heard of, creatures from a world so hostile that most species considered it uninhabitable. Admiral Kwang Su Sung Ho said over the communication link, "Our people are in your debt forever. How can we possibly repay what you have done for us?" The human admiral's response surprised everyone who heard it. Admiral Sung Ho, we don't want payment or tribute. We want something much more valuable. We want friendship. Our species is new to the galaxy, and we have much to learn about the civilizations out here. Perhaps we can help each other grow stronger together. Commander Hijin looked at her fellow officers in amazement. These humans had traveled across the galaxy, fought an impossible battle, and saved an entire civilization. They were asking for friendship instead of demanding rewards. 3 weeks later, crystal spires of Zilani Prime gleamed in, the light of their golden sun, as the first human diplomatic shuttle descended toward the capital city. Ambassador Hayren pressed her face to the small viewport, marveling at the beauty of a garden world. Everything was so different from Earth. Gentle breezes instead of hurricane winds. Clear skies instead of radiation storms. Peaceful landscapes instead of active volcanoes. Elder Minzu waited on the landing platform, his pale blue skin shimmering in the sunlight. When the human ambassador stepped off the shuttle, he was surprised by how ordinary she looked. After seeing the terrifying efficiency of human warriors, he had expected their diplomats to be equally intimidating. "Welcome to Zilani Prime, Ambassador Harin," Minsu said, performing the traditional Zilani bow. "Though I must confess, we're still adjusting to the idea of Deathworlders as allies rather than threats." Harin smiled warmly, breathing the sweet, clean air of the garden world. "Elder Minsu, humans learned long ago that survival is much easier when you have friends watching your back. We'd like to share our defensive technologies with your people, and in return, hope you can teach us about galactic civilization and diplomacy." The Zilani elders studied the human ambassador carefully. She was small and seemed fragile, but her eyes held the same intense determination he had seen in Admiral Kyung-soo during the battle. Their humans might look harmless, but they carried the strength of their deadly homeworld in their spirits. Ambassador Minsu replied, "I believe this will be the beginning of a most unusual and powerful alliance." News of the human victory and their unexpected offer of friendship spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the secure chambers of the Corvin Republic, the High Assembly spent days debating whether to establish contact with Earth. The recordings of the battle showed impossible things: ships fighting from inside a star, armor that could withstand weapons designed to crack planets, and warriors who kept fighting even when their vessels were falling apart around them. In the military academies of the Exian Confederacy, analysts studied every second of the battle footage, trying to understand how 67 ships had defeated an enemy fleet that numbered in the hundreds. The human tactics made no sense, according to traditional military doctrine, but they had worked with devastating effectiveness. Meanwhile, on Earth, in the gleaming halls of the United Nations Space Command headquarters, orbiting high above the blue marble of humanity's homeworld, Admiral Kyung-soo met with his senior staff to plan their species' next steps among the stars. "Sir," reported Captain Bioram, scanning through dozens of diplomatic messages on her tablet, "we're receiving contact requests from 17 different alien species. It seems the entire galaxy suddenly wants to talk to us." Kyung-soo walked to the massive viewport that showed Earth slowly rotating below them. The planet that had tried to kill humanity for millions of years now looked peaceful and beautiful from space. But he knew the violent reality hidden beneath those swirling clouds. Bioram, for 4 billion years, this planet threw everything it had at us. Ice ages that lasted millennia, asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun, supervolcanoes that poisoned the air, radiation storms that should have sterilized all life. But we survived it all. We adapted, we grew stronger, and we learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help others survive too. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Kyung-soo turned back to his staff, and for the first time since the battle, he allowed himself to smile. "Signal all fleet commanders. We're going to show this galaxy that Deathworlders make the best friends you could possibly ask for. And prepare a formal message for the Galactic Council. Tell them that Earth is ready to take its place among the stars." As human ships began spreading across the galaxy, carrying both the promise of protection and the offer of genuine friendship, a new age began. The species that had survived the impossible had become the guardians of the possible. Other civilizations would learn that while humans were indeed dangerous, they were dangerous in defense of those they called friends. The Zilani were the first to benefit from this friendship, but they would not be the last. Across the vast expanse of space, threatened species would learn to broadcast a simple message into the void: "Help us, humans." And from the death world called Earth, the answer would always be the same: "We're coming."